Good morning. There we go. I know the French toast made you sleepy, right? But I hear it was good. So I'm Deb Brown, as you just heard, and today we're going to get into action right away. I'm going to share the idea-friendly method. You're going to do some work. So get out one of those lovely notebooks you have and your pen, and let's get started. You probably want to know, Brian, would you forward it for me? It's not working. Thank you. What the idea-friendly method is, right? So you want to start with your big goal, the thing that it is that you want to see for your community. And I encourage you to think big. What would really make a difference in your community? The next step is you use that goal to gather your crowd. And then you and that newly formed crowd is a new network and powerful. You start working with each other to lead you into taking small steps so you can test and try your ideas out without worrying about failure. Next. So let's share a story. In Akron, Iowa, the mayor invited me to come, and we did this same kind of thing, talked to a group of people, and then she decided to invite everybody out to a Plant Your Flag party. Now, in rural America, you know, we don't meet if we don't eat, so there was food and coffee, of course, and lots of people showed up with different things they wanted to see in their community. And they were handed a flag. They could write their big idea on the flag, or they could go join somebody else's flag. And Akron is 1,500 people. It's not a big town at all. And they came up with lots of great ideas. Next, please. The youth were the ones that kicked it off first. And I'm talking about high school students. They wanted to scoop the loop. Now, they'd never done it before, and some of the old-timers of my age thought that was a brilliant idea. Let's go scoop the loop and have some fun. And that's what happened. Everybody came out and got in their cars and rode with their friends, and the restaurants were running out cups of coffee for people, and there were treats everywhere. It was just a fabulous community event that was not a fundraiser, that was simply for the locals to enjoy themselves and meet each other. And that's always wonderful to do that in your community. Now, Akron, since that gathering, next please, they have created 7 new restaurants. Think about that, 1,500 people, 7 restaurants, that's kind of a big deal. The Lazy Ape campground added cabins, and you can see me sitting at a cabin with the mayor there. Walking trails. The vet clinic purchased the lot next to it and doubled in size. Someone bought a house and converted it into a new lodge, so there was new housing for people that came to visit. The lumber yard was bought by a young couple, and they completely rehabbed it and are doing smashing business. They believe in their community. And then more young families are moving in. One of the things they did for housing, the city owned some property, so they made it into lots and make sure it had all the infrastructure, and they sold those lots for $500 a piece with the codicil that you had to build within a year's time. And if you didn't build, the city took the lot back. There are no more empty lots. They're continuing to expand as we sit here and talk. $500 for a lot. Who does that? Well, Akron, Iowa did it, and it's made a huge difference in their community. Next, please. So, get your pen and paper out. I would like you to share with me what your big goal is. And think about it this way. If our town had, or if our town was. And it doesn't have to be tied to your job. It could be what you personally would like to see in your community. We're going to do this quick, give you 30 seconds. Good thing I have a second hand on my Apple Watch here. Thanks to the sponsors for giving out all these notebooks for you guys to write in. Okay, Brian. So the next part is gather your crowd. And when I talk about gather your crowd, I want you to think about calling a friend up and saying, hey, let's go over to the coffee shop. I want to share an idea with you. Or calling a buddy and saying, let's go have a beer. I got some ideas. Bring your cousin John. For example, that's how you gather your crowd. It doesn't have to be more than one person. It could be 20, but start small. You're going to talk about ideas that excite people, not ideas of things that have to be done. This is why we recommend to write down what you'd like to see in your community, and hopefully it excites your friends and family members too. Brian? So what would be the old way to gather a crowd? Yeah, form a committee. Yeah, I see some smiles. We all know what it is. We had an actual Chamber of Commerce sent out this notice to all their members, and let me read it here. We are planning for our annual programs. Please see attached and let us know which committees you wish to serve on. Thank you for your support. I know you've gotten emails like that. All of us have. Brian? Well, in State and Sublimity, Oregon, they killed all of their committees. All of them. Yeah, I know. That was my thought too. What? They killed them. Yes, they did. Their new way was to use people when they needed them. They reached out when they had an event coming up, and we need someone to find a local band for us. Just little small steps that you could be involved in a small but meaningful way. And Elena Turpin told us that they're really making a difference in the community. She said, then your organization becomes a movement that people can get behind, not just another volunteer opportunity. And there's a difference between please serve on our committees and becoming a movement that people could get behind. Brian? It's the difference between committees and activities. I was in Columbiana, Ohio, and this is an image of a building downtown that had a broken window, and the owner just put up a piece of plywood over it. And you know, everybody was complaining, well, what's the deal? Why has he got plywood? Why doesn't he fix it? So instead of forming a committee to find out how we should go talk to him, I just went over and knocked on his door and asked him, so you have this lovely building, what's going on? How come the window's broken? And he said to me, I'm waiting for someone to rent it and I'll build it out to spec. I'll make sure they get what they want. Imagine all these people talking about why doesn't he cover it? And all you had to do was go ask. So don't hesitate to talk to people. If you have a question, go to your businesses. Ask them questions. Brian? In the meantime, the city manager found some funds, hired a local artist to come paint this image on that piece of plywood. What made it different was that that artist came during an event downtown and did the work, so people could come enjoy watching him. He's a pretty famous local artist. Watch him do his work and tour the empty building. Made a huge difference. Of course, that building's now rented. So you want to move from asking people to join your organization or your committee to becoming a movement by joining in activities that they can enjoy. Next, please. In Bennettsville, South Carolina, they hold a newcomers gathering, and it's really simple. They have their local realtors personally invite people they've sold houses to or rented property to show up. And there's people like me there. I happen to be at this meeting. They just shared a little bit about being involved in your community. The mayor was there. One woman asked, can I burn garbage in my burn barrel back in my backyard? You don't get paperwork when you move somewhere that says if you can burn garbage or not. This is where the kind of opportunity where you can ask those questions. Several people wanted to know where they could volunteer. We ended up doing a tour of local buildings the next morning, just local empty buildings, and two young gentlemen purchased a building and opened an antique store there because they attended a newcomers gathering and had the opportunity to have conversations with each other and elected officials and a few other people that were there. And remember, these are your new locals. These are your people now. They're not visitors anymore. They live here. Next, please. So, if you gathered your crowd, who would they be? Look at your big idea and think about who might be interested in your big idea. And please don't bring them to a meeting at City Hall. Invite 4 or 5 friends to come over to your house. Have coffee. Have a real conversation. When you get out of, and I don't want to talk bad about City Hall, but it carries a weight with it. A lot of government buildings do. And it's hard to move beyond that weight and hard to stop being so damn polite all the time. And when you get out of that environment, you can be a little bit more easier with your friends and family. Are you writing? Some of you are quick. Good job, Talia. Next, please. All right, so you built your crowd with that big idea. Now you're going to turn that crowd into a powerful network. And this is how it works. I'll share a story. In Minerva, Ohio, we pulled together the industrial CEOs of several different companies. There are about 7 of them in the area. And they had never gotten together as a group, just them. I made the chamber director leave, and I made the city manager leave. This was for them. We gathered their crowd, and I asked them to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about what they did and what a challenge was that they had. And it started kind of slow because they didn't all know each other, which was unusual, right? You'd think they'd know each other. They didn't. But once they got into the swing of things, they really started making a difference. One gentleman spoke up and said, you know, I think I'm going to have to leave the community. I don't have any more land around me. I can't expand. I've got to move to a larger place. And another gentleman said, whoa, 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 whoa. No, you're not going to leave. We have land. Let's work something out. And they developed a partnership and did, in fact, work something out. If they had not gathered their crowd and built that powerful network and did outreach to each other, that would not have happened. Now, for you and your friends and your family, do you know if you could paint murals on the side of a building? Who would you ask about that? Well, you might call the city manager and say, hey, I own a building, I'm going to paint a mural on it. You might do that. You might be like me and just do it. Next, please. I can go down that segue, but we won't. Another story in Idaho, economic developer named Jessica wanted to have a brewery. She must be the only town that doesn't already have a brewery. There's quite a few of them in Idaho. And she went up to people and said, I want a microbrewery. Do you want to do that? You should start a microbrewery. Why don't we have a microbrewery? It's kind of annoying. Next. So, what would be the old way to build connections? I'm going to read it because I want you to feel it. She could present the idea at a meeting of our Economic Development Board. They could take a vote, refer it to the Subcommittee for Business Development, who can order a feasibility study. The expert will look at it in a couple of months, write it up, submit the yeah, I'm done reading. But you've all been through this. You know how it works to get things started when you have to be a little more official or a lot more official by working through your board. Next, please. The new way is, why don't you just start a home brew group? Trust me, put it out there on Facebook. Who's brewing beer at home? And bring them together in somebody's garage or backyard. Who's ever brewing, have a great time. You know what's going to happen. Yes, they're going to drink beer, for sure. But they're also going to think and speak about, well, what if we started our own brewery? What would we need? How could we make this happen? And given who's at that gathering, there are plenty of connections. Somebody's going to know suppliers. Somebody's going to know the guy that sits on city council that can help them, because you've gathered your crowd and now you're building more connections. And by the way, this whole process is part of the 3rd step, which is take small steps. Every time you do something is a small step. Please, go ahead. So what we know is that community happens when people talk to each other. If you have a question, just go ask somebody. Don't ask the person who doesn't know. Ask the person who you have a question about. And then you want to start by attracting others to your big idea. Don't go to the board first. As an organization, please do not go to the board and say, we have this idea, we want to start this, and it's going to cost X amount of dollars, and we're pretty sure we can do it. Because the board's going to say, yeah, no, you don't have any proof. But by taking small steps, trying your idea out, now you can bring something to the board and say, hey, we had 3 little mini events, and wow, did they really work? And now we have some pop-up businesses. We'd like whatever it is you'd like. Now your board can say, oh, they're doing stuff. Okay, well, there's a good idea. Next, please. All right, so if you built connections, I want you to start writing these down too. Who are they? What is the equivalent of a home brew group around your big idea? Okay, Brian. And next up, the third step is take small steps. What small steps do is they give you measurable progress. They also give you the opportunity to fail. It's okay to fail when you're taking small steps. It's an idea where you can try things out, you can test it, see if it works. It's not a big, huge thing that you want to do that you're going to fail, that you can't fail at. In Webster City, we created an incubator program. I was the chamber director there. I had this idea. I was tired of looking at empty buildings, so I went to one of the owners and said, hey, let's do an incubator project. Here's how it works. First 3 months rent are free, and then reduce rent the rest of the year. Now, the good news is whoever rents it is going to pay the utilities, so your building doesn't sit empty and they're paying for the bills for it. And it's a way to start, maybe give somebody a chance to start their own business. And to my great happiness, they agreed and said, let's do this. So the 2 young ladies here work at a Mexican grocery store right downtown who was saving money up to buy a commercial hood, which apparently are not cheap. And they wanted to put a restaurant at the back of their huge store. So they decided to go across and try one of these buildings that was set up with a commercial kitchen in it. What this did, they were there for a year. It gave them a chance to try out new recipes. It gave them the chance to train their staff and really test and see if they could find people that were the kind of workers they were looking for. They had the opportunity to try different hours. That was kind of cool. Nobody came at 11 o'clock at night, but people stayed till 9. They found out really valuable information for them in an opportunity where they were paying less rent and able to test and try things out. Next, please. So I talked about how lots of ideas will fail, and I do mean lots of them. Many of them will fail. And Clay Shirky, an author, said, failure is free, high-quality research offering direct evidence of what works and what doesn't. So don't be afraid to fail, particularly when you're taking small steps. This is the chance for you to take a look and say, why didn't that work? What could we have done different? And even maybe to say, we're done. We tried it. We knew it. It's not going to work for us. I love that. You'll spend less time planning and more time doing and quickly learning. Next, please. Small steps also means you don't have to do all the work, Talia. Let's look at 2 concerts. I was teasing her last night. She does an awful lot of work. In the first concert, it was at a big agricultural concern, and they brought out live music to their farm, a band that you've seen on TV, pretty well-known group of people. And they did all the marketing and put it in the newspaper and on the radio, and they did all the work. They arranged for all the food. One of their people cooked it. I mean, really, they did all the work. And then when only a few people showed, they were surprised. They didn't get it. One of their fans put this on Facebook. People keep saying there's nothing to do in this town. But then when we put something on, they don't turn out. It happens. It happens when somebody else is doing all the work. Let's look at what does work. Next, please. The other concert happened in my town. Chamber director, 25-year-old Mike, walked into my office. He's a musician, and said, Deb, we need to have live concerts here. We need to do something in that park over there. And I agreed with him, and I said, you're absolutely right. What are you going to do about it? And he was flabbergasted. He goes, you mean I can do something about it? Yeah, you can. You want to have a concert? What do you want to do about it? So we shared some ideas, and I sent him on his way to see if he'd do anything. Well, he came back a couple of days later and said, okay, me and the guys, we want to do open mic. We talked about that. We're going to do all the ads. We got some friends that are going to share. They had a plan. They figured it out. That crowd grew quick and implemented it quick, too, because they had small but meaningful steps that lots of people could do. Next, please. They created music in the park. It was so successful, they did it 3 times that summer. Now you have to know that Mike and his band is a heavy metal band. In a town of 8,000 people in central Iowa, heavy metal isn't what everybody wants to listen to. But they chose to do open mic, and they were the band behind supporting the singers. So it was a great compromise that worked really well. And what they found out, all these different small but meaningful steps, people brought their own lawn chairs and sat and listened. The open mic people showed up. A country western singer that was 91 years old, and we literally had to pull him off the stage. He'd still be singing if we'd let him. We had a poetry reading. All different kinds of people showed up to share their skills. It was just a grand time. And the local Hy-Vee prepared $5 burgers. So you can get burgers, potato chips, and a drink for $5. I mean, it just turned into a wonderful thing. A fellow from the nearby town brought lights because he figured this would go longer into night and they'd need more lights. We didn't ask him to do that. Mike didn't ask him to do that. He just did that on his own. This is what happens when you give people the opportunity to participate. Next, please. A couple of more stories here. RVTV is an event in the state. It's football, Iowa versus Iowa State, big, huge game. And the WHO TV goes to a small town every day, and they asked Webster City if they could come to our town. And you just don't say no to that opportunity. But here's the thing. It was 12 hours of entertainment they wanted. Have you ever tried to plan 12 hours of nonstop entertainment? It's insane, and I didn't want to do that. So we gathered our crowd. We asked people to show up and talk about what they wanted. And then we just said, do that. Oh, that's a great idea. You can do that. Chili cook-off was one of them. Now, their glitch in the giddy-up where they reached out to us was they didn't know the rules for preparing food outside at an event. The state had some pretty strict rules. Because we had connections, we could call the state food examiner, and he came over and just trained them all what they had to do at no charge. That's building connections. And they had a great time. The TV guys got to taste the chili and choose their favorite. It was fun. Next, please. A local youth group showed up. They wanted to play human foosball, and they would build the set. I had no idea what it was. And I just said, how much room do you need? They told us. I'm like, all right, you can go set up over there. It was one of the most attended events of the day. As you can see, people had a grand time playing human foosball. Now, you know, there was a curmudgeon that spoke up and said, but what about insurance? We reached out to the State Farm insurance guy, new in town, and said, we're going to need $500 to cover this insurance, we think. Do you want to sponsor that? And he said, yeah, sure. Can I put banners up? I'm like, yeah. He got the best marketing for $500 that he'd ever had. The state TV station was there. Everybody showed up to play. Lots of pictures were taken. It was all over Facebook for $500. You can't buy that kind of enjoyment and advertising. Thank you. Next, please. All right. So how can you make some smaller but more meaningful small steps? Again, take your pen and pencil out and write it down. Look at your big idea. Think about who your crowd is, who you're going to gather around. Maybe you need some more connections. Write down, that could be a small step. Maybe you know your grandma knows how to do that phone call thing that old ladies know how to do, where they call one and they call one and they call one. Ask her to participate. That's a small but meaningful step. It's a great way to spread the word. And of course, put it out on social media. Those are all things that a group of people can do and move the project further along. Next, please. Okay, now we're going to get into the interactive rural business models. Tiny, temporary, together, traveling, and tech. The first one is tiny and temporary, or temporary and together. This picture is in Jackson County, Kentucky. There's a big empty lot, kind of messy, and I asked who owned it, and she was in the room for a gathering we were having. She goes, "Oh, that's mine." I'm like, what if our artist could set up over there during that big car show that you have? And everybody thought, oh, that's a great idea, and they took and ran with it. One of the artist's husband showed up with a weed whacker and weed whacked the whole place. It still looked kind of crummy, but they didn't care because they wanted to showcase their work and sell their work. And it kicked off a whole huge art explosion in that county. Next, please. This is Tiny. Will makes parachute cord bracelets. And at a local event, his mother had a booth. He sold his parachute cord bracelets for $5 a piece. So he's a tiny business inside a tiny business. He tested his idea to try it out to see if that price point worked, to see if people would buy it, if they'd like it. And they did. He was 9. Next, please. Dog grooming's another great way. This is traveling. And one of our clients sent us a picture of this. They created a trailer into that. And they travel around to different areas and do dog grooming. Perfect in rural communities where you probably don't have enough business just to stay in one town. Next, please. This is Leo. He took his mobile home and made it look like this, kind of like an old train car. And he goes and parks in front of hardware stores and does tool sharpening. It's kind of a skill that's hard to find these days. And it ends up pulling a lot of old guys in to bring their different tools that need sharpening, but also to sit and visit, have a good time. Leo loves it, and it creates more business for the hardware store. And he's got a route that he runs. Next, please. This is in Minnesota. It's a coffee shop, actually, and they had a big blank wall. The owner reached out to a photographer whose business, he worked from home, did his business from home, and asked him, can you put up some of your photos on this wall? And yeah, can you do that? And the guy said, well, yeah, that'd be great. This is cross-pollination at its best. So the guy coming for coffee looks at the photos. The person coming for photos has some coffee. It has worked very well for both concerns. Next, please. You can do that in a service business, in a real estate office. You just need a blank wall. And do these tiny steps really make a difference, these innovative rural business models? Yes, they do. This is Rose Ellis. She used to have a big art studio, but as she aged, she found that it became unaffordable to be able to work in the studio and try to sell art. Lives in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And there was a gentleman that owned an empty building, and he literally split it up into shared spaces. It was awesome. And Rose decided to take the front window. So people walking by the street got to see her work and also got to see her work as well. And Rose told us in an interview, you couldn't get me out of here with a crowbar. It is the best business plan I never thought of. It has turned my life around. Painting in a window. Next, please. So now let's talk about some solutions. Creative community solutions. So in this image, Sue Anderson is a fabulous crocheter, and she wanted to see if she could sell some of her product at a ladies' night out event around the holidays. So she took a space in an empty building, set up, did really well, sold all of her crocheted stuff. Now her original idea was she wanted to open up her own store. She changed her mind. She did not want to work that hard. If she sold everything out on one night, what would her production be like if it was just her? Crazy. And she wanted to retire and maybe crochet a few things. And that's what she does today. She sells in other stores. You can find her at the local beauty shop. You can find her at the furniture store, just little pieces here and there. Next, please. You could have business inside a business. This is in Minnesota, and a gas station. And the owner found out that he needed dog food because there was nowhere they could buy dog food in town, and jams and jellies. So he found two different businesses, one that makes organic dog food and the other one that makes jams and jellies, and gave them just a tiny little spot, you're looking at it, to sell their product. Works out for both. Next, please. I want you to think about using your underutilized spaces, empty lots, for example. This is in Nebraska, Lyons, Nebraska, and it's actually an art project. They set up furniture in an empty lot in the summertime. But we think about this, what would it be like if your commissioner wanted to meet people in town a little bit more, could show up the first Tuesday of every month in an empty lot with a couple of chairs? Give people the opportunity to come and visit in a more relaxed space. And we've seen it done in smaller communities. Next, please. The Zuni Pueblo leaders, in the town that they're in, they didn't have very many empty buildings. So they decided to all come together under a big tent and sell together their own products, but sell in one location. And it's been extremely successful for them versus just having a pop-up here or a pop-up there. It's drawn more people to the location, and they've made more money working together than they would have individually. So they found that sharing space really made a difference. Next, please. Alva, Oklahoma has an art walk, and they actually put quilts in each of the buildings. Now, this is a quilt from your community from about 12 years ago. It's beautiful. Imagine if your retail stores, you guys got together and created an art walk and partnered with your musicians and your artists and your makers and got together and created this event called an art walk. Be open a little bit later, give away stuff, have food. It's your event, do whatever you want with it. But work together. This is building those partnerships that you're going to need if you want to continue to be successful. Please, next. I love this one. Rock Springs, Wyoming had an empty lot. Rock Springs created their own miniature golf course with rocks. Isn't that brilliant? Now the local businesses downtown take care of it, and the only thing that they request visitors to do, it's free, is to leave their email address and expect to get an email or two from the businesses. Really a win. The visitors have a great time, and the local businesses are building up their email list. Think about how you might be able to do that. Please, next. I'm going fast, sorry. Kingman, Kansas has taken bins and put out in public. They're grain bins and put out in public, and you can rent them out daily, weekly, or monthly and have whatever kind of retail store you want in there. Next, please. In fact, the kids of one family sat up in front of their grain bin. They grew these vegetables and gathered these eggs themselves. This is an opportunity for them to learn about handling money and talking about their product and being responsive to people in public. You're creating tiny entrepreneurs by doing that kind of thing. Next, please. This is in Tionesta, Pennsylvania, population 500. It's in the Allegheny Mountains, mountains on one side and a river on the other side. And they had a block-long building burned down. And it sat empty for 10 years because they were hoping another big concern would come and build. And that didn't happen. Finally, somebody on the Economic Development Council said, what if we put garden sheds there? Let's create many spaces. And another person on that council said, well, as long as you put facades on them so they look like the rest of the town, it's worth trying. We got a little bit of money, let's try it. Next, please. That was 10 years ago. This is how it looks still today. They are literally garden sheds. Now the city furnishes the electricity, which I think is lovely. There's an American doll maker, clothes maker. There's a guy that makes fishing lures in the wintertime and sells them in the summertime. I think he just sells them so he can talk to people. There's a restaurant, there's an artist, there's a bakery, there's a winery that has a location out of town, and they come and they set up from May through October. And when I visited with them, they told me they netted $30,000 that summer. That's a decent chunk of change to set up in a garden shed. Next, please. So who can benefit from the idea-friendly method? All of these people: artists, entrepreneurs, your leaders, organizations, and residents. Now, this image is from Georgia, Sparta, Georgia. The librarian sent it to us. They actually painted 20 different hopscotch things on their path behind the library, put 2 layers of sealant on it. That picture's 2 years old and is still vibrant. And it's bringing lots of people to the library to play hopscotch and go to the library. That's pretty easy to do. What could you do with your downtown streets? Next, please. Crafternoons is where you invite a group of people to just show up with their craft and do stuff together. It could be painting, it could be crocheting, it could be quilt making. Doesn't matter. Find out who's in your community and ask them to come and enjoy each other's company. Because these are your possible entrepreneurs. These are your people that can go in shared spaces and in pop-ups and be at events and fairs. These are the people you want to know. Next, please. The Old Geezers Club in Akron, Iowa. Retired farmers moved into town, because that's what retired farmers in Iowa do, and brought along all their woodworking equipment. And their wives said, that can't be in our garage. It's winter here. Get that stuff somewhere else. They found an empty building, decided to meet every day for coffee, and there was a dry basement, so they moved all of their shared equipment into that dry basement. They now work with the shop class. They work with anybody that wants to come and try and make a table or a piece of furniture. So you don't have to go buy the expensive equipment. You can try it out first. I think that's brilliant. And now that empty building is getting tiny spaces, all kinds of new businesses, lots of them artists, but they have a massage studio and a Reiki studio there now too. Next, please. Village in Washington, Iowa, 15,000 square feet. Group of women got together and decided, let's bring our entrepreneurs in. And if you look at these pictures, some are an entire wall, but some are tiny little tables. Like maybe I make jewelry and I just want a little table to try out and see if my product will sell. And what they found is by renting, starting small and working your way up, several of their businesses have moved into other empty buildings in town because they've been given a chance to try their idea out in a shared space. Next, please. Next, please. We're going to skip a couple because we're down to 5 minutes. Tech workers. I want you to think about these folks. Look on Etsy, Shopify, Upwork, and Fiverr, and you're going to find people that are already working at home. Your web designers, your writers, your programmers, marketers, consultants, virtual assistants. These are all people that work really well in shared spaces as well, like co-working. If you want a successful co-working, don't just make it all work. Create events and educational opportunities too, to bring people in to meet each other and share information. Next, please. The pillars of the community are retired old people, Minnesota. This group of people, think of Lucy with her booth with advice for 5 cents. It's exactly what they do. They set up a booth that says pillars of the community and they give advice. It's wonderful for them. They're still involved in the community, not doing anything really important, but on occasion, they do get asked some great questions and they're able to help. Pillars of the community. Next, please. And coffee and calendars. Talia, this is the one I want you to do. I think she walked out on me. Bring your organizations together with their calendars. Offer coffee. And how you start out, make the organization similar to what you do. And it could be businesses, it could be service industry, it could be any group of businesses. And have them introduce themselves, the name of their company, and share one thing the public may not know about them. You'd be surprised at how much you don't know about your businesses in the community. And then you take your calendars out and you find if there's a way that you can partner up together on events. So maybe both of you have something planned for noon, 2 Saturdays from now. What if I change mine to 3 o'clock and you keep yours at noon? Now we've got a reason to get people in town for 6 hours instead of having to choose between 2 different ones. Next, please. And let's get started. So Averett, Oklahoma used to be about 300 people at its largest. Today there are 33 residents in town. But they wanted to do something, and they had quite a few artists, so they decided, they had a lake that had dried up, that they were going to sell dehydrated fish licenses. So you could come and fish at the lake that had no water in it. It was a fundraiser. It's a great idea, and it brought people to town, and they had pop-ups of different artists shared around the community too. And those 33 people participated, all of them were able to participate in this event. Next, please. Next, please. So one final thing I want you to keep in mind, that collaboration is about working together. It's not about signing tasks to different people of things to do. It's about finding ways to work together. And each person needs to be able to take their small step. And yes, it's going to be chaotic, but that's where the fun is, and that's where the magic happens. And you've dealt with worse chaos. Next, please. How much time do I have? Okay. Well, you know, I just didn't want to overgo my time. So I spent 2 years on a community building project in Montana. I was traveling back and forth. And 5 counties were involved, and we had to choose something where all the counties could work together, and they decided the Bozeman Trail traveled through all 5 counties, and there really wasn't a good map of that trail. So we figured out, well, let's gather our crowd. Who is that going to be? And reenactors showed up, cowboys showed up, museum owners and workers showed up. There was a wide range, about 12 different people showed up to start working together. And each small step that any of these people take or idea they put into place, it's about the trail. It's not about the project, but it's about the trail. It's a living thing. It doesn't matter if this project never ends. People can continue to build on this excitement and work in these 5 counties in different ways related to the Bozeman Trail. Next, please. It just shows you a nice picture, right? Next, please. So Penny she was a museum person, had several maps in her museum, and both of these guys are map makers. So they got together. Mike had many videos that he had taken along the trail, and he shared those. Several people would visit the access points. There were lots of folks that wrote support letters. Mike was also doing the same thing in Wyoming, trying to create a historical trail down there. So everybody wrote support letters for Mike, and of course wrote support letters for us. They coordinated with the local college in Billings, and they had a GPS organization, I don't know, a class, and they helped with the map making, and their students got actively involved in making this correct map. That was really pretty cool too. Oh, it was crazy chaotic, and we had Zoom calls every month, and nobody was in charge, but a lot got done, and a lot is still getting done today, because it's a project those 5 counties have gathered together and decided mattered to them, and they continue to work on it. Next, please. Rose Williamson is a Crow historian, but she tells the story of the Battle of Little Bighorn from the Crow perspective. So she came and did a presentation for us out on a battlefield. That was really cool, because I hadn't expected to hear it from the other side. Perspective is so important. If that's something you can do, tell your stories. Because you may be the only one that knows it. Don't assume other people know your stories. Next, please. So these are some of the things that happened. Bill Yellowtail swore he had tracks on his land. That's his land. But nobody could agree if that really was part of the trail. Didn't matter. We had a good time. Columbus The trail runs right down their main street, so at their yearly celebration, they celebrate the trail as well. Joliet has covered wagon that's not covered anymore, that's really old, and they have decorated it to match with the travels of the Bozeman Trail the 6 years that it was in existence. And that's just a few examples. Next, please. So let's take a look at what might be possible in your community. We're going to start with housing. We do a survey of rural challenges every other year, and number one, the last 2 surveys, was housing. So I just want to share a couple of stories here of ideas that you may be able to pick up on. Next, please. Mobile Leaves and Fishes in Austin, Texas, have addressed the homeless situation there, and it's an interesting story because they've partnered with realtors and churches and other people interested in addressing the homeless situation. They've earned $1.5 million collectively through micro enterprise businesses. So they're teaching their people that need housing how to have a micro enterprise business. A fabulous idea. In your county, according to Dr. Google, there are 125 homeless people in your county, but 24% of people live below the poverty line. That's 1 paycheck away from being homeless. Something for you to think about. Next, please. Can you build a house for under 100 grand? Developers will tell you no. But these folks found something on the to-do app of housing that had built. They built that house for $50,000. That was the end result. There are resources online that can help you, that can make a difference in your community. Next, please. So this is just a description of what middle housing is. I don't like to say low-income housing anymore. I like middle housing because the majority of people in rural America are people that live in middle housing. So let's pay attention to our people, right? And what I like about this design here is it's like a semicircle courtyard. And the parking for the cars is behind the houses, but everybody shares the courtyard. So you can have a tiny house there, not a mobile home, a tiny house. You can have a 2-story house for a larger family. Grandma wants to get out of her big old house. You can find a small 1-level house built just for her. Think about how you can bring your community together in different ways. Next, please. The next question is, can you afford it? Can you afford to do anything on housing? Yes. Your workforce services have programs and grant funds available. This is the link. By the way, you'll get a PDF of this presentation. This is the link that you can go and research the grant funding that you already have that I found easily, and there's more. There are people in this room that can help you with more. Next, please. Finally, Iowa State University studied 99 towns over 20 years. And they had wins, they had losses, they had bad storms, they had good weather. Didn't matter. Over 20 years, lots happened all over the place. Next, please. What the researchers found is, no matter what happened or didn't happen, the towns that prospered best were the ones that were open to new ideas and welcome new people into the community, helping them make decisions about the future of the community. So are you open to new ideas? Or are you stuck in the old way of doing things? You know, you don't have to know all the answers. You just have to be willing to get started. Next, please. Next, please. Start where you are. And finally, thank you for having me here. We do a weekly free email, my business partner and I, Becky McRae and I at Savior.town, that shares all kinds of stories related to rural challenges. And please feel free to sign up, take a shot, Savior.town, .town, not .com, .town /sign up.